Welcome back to another episode of Southern Sorcery. Thanks so much for choosing to spend some time with us today, guys. We really appreciate it, and you will not be disappointed because today we are looking at the new Marvel crossover with Magic the Gathering, which has just been announced this last week. Things are going to be ramping up. As you may know, there are more sets coming with more Marvel characters, so this secret layer drop that just got announced is just the tip of the iceberg. Very cool, very fun. Hopefully we'll be bringing in a ton of new fans to Magic the Gathering. That said, if you're here and you don't know how to play Magic the Gathering, just drop down in the comments, say, hey, I want to check this out. I love Marvel. What is this game? And we'll give you a shout back, and we will hopefully get everyone set up and learn how to play this amazing game. And we can all have a good time together, hanging out, having fun. So yeah, before we get into it, do all those YouTube things. Smash the like button. Please give us a like and subscribe. It helps us out a ton, especially if you're new here. Go ahead and subscribe. That way you don't miss out on any of our upcoming videos, which we will be covering extensively this new Marvel and Magic crossover. So be on the lookout for more of those kinds of videos from us. So with no further ado, let's check it out. So today we have the maybe most popular mutant of all time. This is going to be Wolverine. The name of the card is Wolverine, best there is. A lot of people would argue he is the best there is. Everybody's favorite mutant for the most part. I think overwhelmingly Wolverine is the most popular mutant. But let's check out what Wolverine best there is actually does and what it means for our deck build. So Wolverine is a legendary creature. He's a mutant berserker hero, notably not a human. And it costs 1, a red and a green for a 2/2. And it says unrivaled lethality. Double all damage Wolverine would deal. So anytime Wolverine deals damage, it will deal double. So right now his power and toughness is 2/2 as depicted in the bottom right hand corner. And so he will deal 2, but because of the unrivaled lethality, he will deal 4 damage instead of just 2. And then at the beginning of each end step, if Wolverine dealt damage to another creature this turn, put a +1/+1 counter on him. So it's going to make him stronger every time he fights or deals damage to another creature. And then if Wolverine would die, there is a 1 and a green, and you can regenerate Wolverine, which of course is right in the vein and flavor of what Wolverine, the actual character, does with his ability to regenerate and recover from damage that is dealt to him in the comics and in the movies. So that's exactly what we're going to do. So we're going to build out a deck where Wolverine is constantly fighting other creatures and then swinging in for big doses of damage against your opponents. And we're going to try to do it as flavorfully as possible. So the build we decided to do with this is going to be about power, but also about flavor. So there are definitely some cards in here that maybe you haven't seen before, or maybe you wouldn't think to put into a deck. But because it's X-Men, because it's Marvel, we wanted to use as much flavor as possible. So that is going to be where we start. So we're going to look at the other cards that actually are going to come in this secret layer. There are 4 other cards that come in this secret layer that have to do with Wolverine. They are reprints of other cards. Okay, so first up, we have Berserk. This is a reprint for Berserk. It has got some awesome Wolverine artwork. Some people are pretty excited about him having no shirt in a couple of these. So yeah, so Berserk says an instant for 1 green, and it says cast this spell only before the combat damage step. It says target creature gains trample and gets +X+0 until the end of turn, where X is its power. So it's going to get a buff of whatever its power is. So if it's a 2/2, it's going to become a 4/2. And then, of course, Wolverine deals double damage, so then he'll deal 8 damage because he'll be at 4. And then it says, at the beginning of the next end step, destroy that creature if it attacked this turn. So that's going to be where the regenerate comes in handy. So we're going to be able to swing in. We're going to use this Berserk card for a bunch of damage to punch through with trample. And then we're going to use that regenerate that's on Wolverine there to keep him from dying whenever this card resolves. And then we also have Rite of Passage. It is 2 and a green for an enchantment that says whenever a creature you control is dealt damage, put a +1/+1 counter on it. So that's any creatures that we control, including Wolverine. Anytime they're dealt damage, you put a +1/+1 counter on them, making them bigger. So great card. Next, we have Rhythm of the Wild. This is a great reprint. It's a great card. It's 1 red-green, or red and green together is also known as Gruel. So 1 and Gruel for a enchantment that says creature spells you control can't be countered. So that's really good. So now anytime we cast a creature, we don't have to worry about whether it can get countered or not, because it can. And then we also have non-token creatures you control have Riot. Riot is a keyword that just means they can either enter with haste or a +1/+1 counter, and that is up to you to decide when you cast them which option you want to choose. So you can either bring them onto the battlefield with a counter or with haste. So very, very useful card. And then the last reprint we've got here is a great one. It is the Ozolith, and it is named Adamantium Bonding Tank. So they have reskinned an existing card in Magic called the Ozolith as Adamantium Bonding Tank. And the artwork there is, of course, Logan in the Adamantium Tank. And then it says, whenever a creature you control leaves the battlefield, if it had counters on it, put those counters on Adamantium Bonding Tank. At the beginning of combat on your turn, if Adamantium Bonding Tank has counters on it, you may move all counters from it onto a target creature. So this is a really great way to store those +1/+1 counters after you've gotten them. If a creature you control that has counters on it dies, you can move the counters to the Ozolith or Bonding Tank, and then at the beginning of combat, you can move them back from the Ozolith onto a different creature, or, you know, if it was Logan, Wolverine, and you recast him, you can put those counters that you had accrued before back onto him. So it's a great way to keep from losing counters. It's a really good card, and it only costs 1 mana, so it's very low to the ground. Really good card, and a great reprint here. So those are the cards that are actually coming in the Wolverine Secret Lair. If you are lucky enough to snag one of those, I know these are going to sell out nearly immediately, so good luck to you if you are trying to buy those. I will be, but, you know, we'll see what happens. So next up, we have some other cards that are getting reskinned in other secret layers. They are also Marvel secret layers, so we're going to just choose to use those skinned versions of these cards. However, they are already existing cards in the Magic universe. But first up, we've got Ice Storm. This is a reprint, and it is a sorely needed reprint. This card is upwards of $80-some. It is called Ice Storm. Of course, this is going to be Storm from X-Men. She has her own secret lair as well, so this is from hers. It is 2 and a green. It says destroy target land. Not necessarily a card we would include in a Gruul counters deck, but because of it being an X-Men themed card, we wanted to throw it in here. Next, we also have Storm's Will. This is also from Storm's secret lair. It is actually a Jessica's Will, which is an extremely good card. It is 2 and a red for a sorcery that says if you control a commander as you cast a spell, you may choose both instead. And you can add red mana to your mana pool for each card in a target opponent's hand. So you're just going to choose whoever has the most cards in their hand, and you're going to add that much mana to your mana pool. And then in addition, you're going to exile the top 3 cards of your library. You can play those cards this turn. So it's some card access that you wouldn't have otherwise. So card advantage, and also a whole bunch of mana. This can be a really powerful card. Next up, we've got Heroic Intervention. This is a staple in any green deck. It is getting reprinted in the Black Panther secret layer, so we added it as well. We were going to add it into this deck anyway. We're just going to use the Black Panther skin, but it is 1 and a green, and it says permanents you control gain hexproof and indestructible until the end of turn. This is great for anytime an opponent is going to cast a board wipe. It hopefully gets around most of those. Anything that says destroy target, whatever. It notably will not get around exiling, so it's not going to get around a farewell. And it's also not going to get around something like Massacre Girl, anything that can reduce your creature's power or toughness to below 0. This will not save that, but very, very useful. Next, we have Arcane Signet. This one is reskinned as Earth's Mightiest Emblem, and it is the gigantic Avengers A that is on the side of the Avengers Tower. Very cool reskin of Arcane Signet. We also have a reskin of Soul Ring. It's a cool picture of the power source that sits inside of Iron Man's chest as the Soul Ring. That one is super cool. And then from there, we are just going to go ahead and move through the rest of the deck, starting out with our other creatures. So first, we've got Beast Whisperer. this is a great source for card draw. Whenever you cast a creature spell, draw a card. Next, we have Cyclops Electromancer. Of course, being X-Men, you have to have a Cyclops, right?
Cyclops, right?
You've got to. So we chose Cyclops Electromancer. When it enters the battlefield, it deals X damage to a target creature an opponent controls, where X is the number of instants or sorceries in your graveyard. Actually works out pretty good here, other than just for the flavor, because we do run a lot of instants and sorceries, as fighting is a huge part of this deck, and a lot of those sorceries and instants are fight spells. So next we've got Enduring Vitality. It is 1 green for an Elk Glimmer with Vigilance, and says creatures you control have add 1 mana of any color. And when it dies, if it was a creature, you can return it to the battlefield as an enchantment. So it has a way of sticking around, albeit not as a creature the second time it comes back, but having the tap add 1 mana of any color on our creatures is really nice. Next, we have Evolution Sage. 2 and a green for an elf druid is a 3/2. When a land enters the battlefield under your control, you proliferate. And proliferate means choose any number of permanents or players and then give each another counter of each kind that is already there. So proliferate can be really good. Mostly we'll be amplifying our +1/+1 counters with this, but there are other things and other kinds of counters, and you can proliferate those as well. Next, we have Evolution Witness. This is also an elf. It is a mutant, so that one falls right into what we want to do. It's an elf shaman mutant for 2 and a green, and it has 1 and a green to adapt to. If this creature has no +1/+1 counters on it, put 2 +1/+1 counters on it. So it's just a way to put counters on itself. And then whenever 1 or more +1/+1 counters are put on Evolution Witness, you can return a target permanent card from the graveyard to your hand. That's huge. A permanent card from your graveyard to your hand. So literally anything other than instants and sorceries you can get back from the graveyard, which includes lands, enchantments, artifacts, creatures, etc. That's great. Next, we've got Goblin Anarchomancer. This is a goblin for Gruul, or 1 red, 1 green. And it says each spell you cast that's red or green costs 1 less to cast. So that's every spell. That's not just creatures. So that will reduce the cost of all of those instants and sorceries as well, which is really nice. Next, we've got Graz, the Unstoppable Juggernaut. And what's a Wolverine deck without a Juggernaut in it?
I'm the Juggernaut, bitch!
Gotta have the Juggernaut. Graz, the Unstoppable Juggernaut, is 8 colorless mana, so 8 mana of any color. For a artifact creature, Juggernaut, it's a 7/5, which is massive, and says Juggernauts you control attack each combat if able. So you have to swing with this if you can. And then Juggernauts you control cannot be blocked by walls. And then other creatures you control have base power and toughness of 5/3. And are Juggernauts in addition to their other creature types. So again, here for the flavor, that's about it. Next, we've got Grumgully the Generous. Each other non-human creature you control enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it. This is really good in this deck. We don't run a single human in this deck, so yeah, that makes things super easy. Next, we've got Kami of Whispered Hopes. It is a spirit. It says if 1 or more +1/+1 counters would be put onto a permanent you control, that many +1 +1/+1 counters are put onto that permanent instead. So just an extra, 1 single extra +1/+1 counter anytime you would put 1 on something. So if you were going to put 1 over here, you put 2. If you're going to put 4 over here, you're going to put 5. So 1 extra anytime you add a counter. And then you can also tap Kami and add X mana of any one color where X is Kami's power. So comes in as a 1/1. We'll tap for 1 mana of your color choice. Next, we have Krenko, 10 Street Kingpin. This one is great because when it attacks, you put a +1/+1 counter on it, and then you make a number of 1/1 red goblin creature tokens equal to Krenko's power. So we can buff up Krenko with some of these other things, other ways to put +1/+1 counters on him, and then we can make more goblins and overrun our opponents. We also have Orion Frostfang. This is a really good card. It's 3 green for a snake. It says attacking creatures you control have death touch. And then whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. So this is really good, and you're going to end up drawing a bunch of cards from it because most of the time, even if you're swinging in with bigger creatures, people don't want to block with a lot of their stuff a lot of the time. So you're either going to kill their things with Death Touch, or you're going to get to draw cards, which is great. Next up, we've got the Professor.
Charles Xavier.
Not Charles Xavier, exactly, but we have the Professor of Zoomancy. This is a bear druid, but it is the Professor. When Professor of Zoomancy enters the battlefield, make a 1/1 black and green pest token with, when this creature dies, you gain 1 life. So we had to have the Professor in here, come on. Next, we've got Rishkar, Pima Renegade. This is an elf druid, and it says whenever it enters the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on each of up to 2 target creatures. So you can put a +1/+1 counter onto up to 2 different creatures. And then it also says each creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it has tap, add a green mana. So it's going to turn your modified creatures into mana dorks. Next, we've got Sakura Tribe Elder. This is a good card. It will ramp you, and you can go get a land. It is simply there for that. It is just a ramp source for us. Sacrifice Steve, and then search your library for a basic land card. Put it onto the battlefield tapped, and then you shuffle. Next, we've got Tarian Mauler. This is a shapeshifter, so this is going to be our Mystique. Tarian Mauler says, whenever an opponent casts a spell, you may put a +1/+1 counter on Tarian Mauler. So this is going to also fit into our +1/+1 counters theme that we've got going, but it's a shapeshifter, so it's every creature type, which falls in line perfectly. This is our Mystique. Next, we've got Temur Sabertooth. You have to have Wolverine's arch nemesis, Sabertooth, in a deck. Of course. So this is Temur Sabertooth. It's 2 and 2 green for a cat creature as a 4/3, and you can pay 1 and a green into it. You may return another creature you control to its owner's hand. If you do, Temur Sabertooth gains indestructible until the end of turn. So it's actually somewhat useful outside of just the flavor. You can pay the 1 and a green into it and bounce something back to your hand. That way you don't lose it if someone's targeting it and trying to get rid of it. Next, we've got Ulvenwald Tracker. This is 1 green for a human shaman. So I lied earlier. We do have 1 human in here. But you pay 1 and a green and tap this, and it says target creature you control fights another target creature. So each of those creatures will deal damage equal to its power to the other one. But we're going to want to use Wolverine for that to get more counters and to double up all that damage. So we can fight stuff that's a lot bigger than us with Wolverine because he has deals double damage. Next up, we've got our sorceries, and we are going to start out with Bushwhack. This is 1 green for a sorcery, and you can choose 1, and you can search your library for a basic land card, reveal it, put it into your hand, and then shuffle, or you can have a target creature you control fight target creature you don't control. So we want it for that fight mechanic, but if we have it in the early game and we're going to miss a land drop, we can always cast this to go grab a land and then play it as our land for turn. I did do that a few times in playtesting through this. Next up, we've got Explore. It's 1 and a green, and it says you may play an additional land this turn, so some ramp, and then you also get to draw a card, so it replaces itself. Then we have Farseek, 1 and a green. You can search your library for a Plains, Island, Swamp, or Mountain card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. So you're going to go fetch something that says Mountain on it and put it on to the battlefield tapped. Then we've got Kodamas Reach. It's also a ramp spell. It is 2 and a green. It says search your library for 2 basic land cards, reveal those cards, put one of them into play tapped and the other into your hand, and then you shuffle your library. So more ramping. And then next we've got Prey Upon. This is a single green. It says target creature you control fights a target creature you don't control. So another way to fight with Wolverine. The great thing about fighting with Wolverine, not only are you going to be able to put the +1/+1 counters on him this way and make him bigger, but you're also going to be able to control the board a little bit. He's already coming in as a 2/2, so you're going to be able to fight stuff straight away and not lose Wolverine, like Esper Sentinel or Blood Artist, or you want to get rid of that Ragavan. You can go and get rid of these things that are absolutely going to be a menace that are out on the board, and then you can regenerate Wolverine. So that's a great spot removal tool for creatures in here. And nice thing about it is green's actually really good already at removing artifacts and enchantments. So having this ability to remove these creatures, and Wolverine's just going to get bigger. So then you can get rid of bigger stuff that's going to be problems. So a really good commander. Next, we're moving into our instants, and so there are a lot more of the same kinds of cards here, starting out with Ancient Animus. This is 1 in a green, and it says put a +1/+1 counter on a target creature you control if it's legendary. Then it fights a target creature an opponent controls. So another fight spell. Next, we've got Beast Within. 2 in a green is a great removal spell. It says destroy target permanent. So it can go and get rid of anything that's on the board that's bothering you. And then whatever you blow up, its controller is going to make a 3/3 beast creature token. So yeah, I'll swap your guy's Cradle with a 3/3 green creature token, no problem. I'm going to get rid of that Bolas' Citadel, and you can have a 3/3 green creature, no problem. Great removal spell. Next, we've got Inspiring Call. This is 2 in a green for an instant that says draw a card for each creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it. Those creatures gain indestructible until the end of turn. So this is a great way to, again, save your board from some destroy effects, and you're going to draw a bunch of cards off of this, hopefully. So good there. Next, we have Nature's Claim. It is a single green, and it says destroy target artifact or enchantment. Its controller gains 4 life. Again, I told you green is good at artifact and enchantment removal. 1 green to get rid of your problem, and then its controller gains 4 life. Yeah, that's cool. You can gain that 4 life. I'm going to get rid of your best thing. Next, we have Overprotect. It's 1 in a green. It says target creature you control gets +3/+3 and gains trample, hexproof, and indestructible until the end of turn. Spoiler alert, people are going to target Wolverine, so we do have some ways in here to protect him. This is a good way to protect him, but also in a pinch can be used to punch in that last little bit of commander damage that you need, giving him +3 and trample. You can cast this at instant speed in combat, so great way to get a win through that someone didn't see coming. Next, we've got Prize Fight. It is 1 and then has hybrid mana, so you can pay 1 and a red or 1 and a green, and target creature you control fights another target creature. Next, we have Prize Fight. It's similar. It says target creature you control fights a target creature you don't control, and you create a treasure token. It's also 1 in a green. So that's nice. You get a treasure back out of it as well. So it ends up kind of only costing you 1. Then we've got Return of the Wild Speaker. This is 4 in a green, and then you can choose 1, and you're going to either draw cards equal to the greatest power among non-human creatures you control. Most likely going to be Wolverine. And then the other option is non-human creatures you control get +3/+3 until the end of turn. So at instant speed, you can very quickly either overrun an opponent or draw a whole bunch of cards. Then we also have Signature Slam. This is a fun one. The artwork on it's really cool. It's 2 in a green for an instant, and it says put a +1/+1 counter on a target creature you control. Then each modified creature you control deals damage equal to its power to target creature you don't control. So notably, this is not fight. This is just deals damage equal to its power to target creature you don't control. So all of your modified creatures, and modified means they either have counters on them, or they have an equipment on them, or they have an aura on them. So equipments, auras, and counters are considered modifications. So anything that is modified is going to deal its power to another target creature you don't control. This can be a board wipe. Very, very easily can be a one-sided board wipe. Next up, we've got Tail Swipe for a single green. Choose a target creature you control and target creature you don't control. If you cast this spell during your main phase, the creature you control gets +1/+1 until the end of turn. Then those creatures fight each other. So this is kind of versatile because you can buff up whatever creature you're choosing. Most likely is going to be Wolverine. You can put a +1/+1 counter on it and fight something. But if you're in combat and you want to swing through and get some damage in, and someone has a blocker, then you want to get Wolverine's damage through. You can at instant speed cast this and have it fight that blocker, kill the blocker, and then deal the rest of that damage on to the opponent. Next up, we've got Titanic Brawl. This is 1 in a green, and it says this spell costs 1 less to cast if it targets a creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it. And then it says target creature you control fights a creature you don't control. So if Wolverine already has a +1/+1 counter on it, this will only cost a single green instead of 2. 1 in a green. Next up, we've got our artifacts, and here we are going to have Commander Sphere and Felwar Stone. Those are both good mana rocks, and are going to ramp us a little bit. And then we have more protection and fun stuff. So first up, we've got Lightning Greaves. This is probably the best equipment in all of Magic. It costs 2, and then the equipped creature has haste and shroud. So haste means that it doesn't have summoning sickness and can attack or tap immediately, and then shroud means it cannot be the target of spells or abilities. So people are not going to be able to remove Wolverine very easily if Lightning Greaves is attached. Mind you, Shroud also means that you cannot target Wolverine, and with a lot of those fight spells and things like that, you may not want to equip this. Next up, we've got Mithril Coat. This is 3 mana for an artifact equipment, and it has flash, so you can play it at instant speed, and it has indestructible. So Mithril Coat itself has indestructible, and then it says when Mithril Coat enters the battlefield, attach it to a target legendary creature you control. So that's going to be Wolverine. And then it says equipped creature has indestructible. So this is going to be very nice because you don't have to pay that equip 3 cost when you cast this. You can just immediately equip it to Wolverine for free, and then it has indestructible, and so does Wolverine. Next, we've got the new Ozolith that came out at the beginning of the year, and it's last year, and then it says Ozolith, the Shattered Spire, is 2 and a green for a legendary artifact, and it says if one or more +1/+1 counters would be put on an artifact or a creature you control, that many +1/+1 counters are put on it instead. So similar to Kami that we spoke about earlier, anytime you go to put +1/+1 counters on, you'll put an additional 1. And then you can pay 1 and a green and tap the Ozolith Shattered Spire and put a +1/+1 counter on a target artifact or creature you control. So if you've got nothing else to do with that mana, you can always use it to put... You're going to put at least 2 +1/+1 counters on a target creature, because you'll put 1 from the tap activated ability and then 2 from the passive ability that we just talked about a second ago. Next up, we have a cool newer card. This one is from Fallout. It is called Power Fist for 1 and a green. The artwork here is very fun too. It's just a guy just punching out this massive monster, not unlike Logan would do in the comics and the movies. Equipped creature has trample, and it says whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, put that many +1/+1 counters on it, and it has a equip cost of 2. So an initial cast of 1 and a green, and then 2 more to equip it. But this is going to be really good for us. We're going to draw a bunch of cards from it when it's equipped to Wolverine, and he's got a bunch of stuff. Next up, we've got Rogue's Gloves. This is a fun, flavorful card here, Rogue's Gloves. I thought that was awesome. Rogue has to wear gloves in X-Men, because otherwise, she sucks people's power. So whenever equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, you may draw a card. It also has an equip cost of 2, so more card draw for us. Next, we've got Swiftfoot Boots. Swiftfoot Boots is probably a little bit better than Lightning Greaves in this deck, just because we want to target Wolverine so much. So Swiftfoot Boots is 2, and then has an equip cost of 1. But this, it's very similar to Lightning Greaves, except for it says equipped creature has hexproof and haste. So hexproof means your opponents can't target it, but you still can target it. So better option in this deck than Lightning Greaves, but I'll take Greaves over nothing. Then we also have Whisper Silk Cloak, similar to the Lightning Greaves. This is an equipment for 3, and it says equipped creature can't be blocked and has Shroud. So now Wolverine's going to be unblockable, which is great, but also it's going to have Shroud, which means that your opponents and you cannot target it any longer. Take it with a grain of salt. Hexproof is better than Shroud. The end. Next up, we've got our enchantments, and in this one, we've got some fun ones. First up, we've got All Will Be One. This is a really fun card in any counters deck, of any kind of counter, that is. It's 3 red, and as an enchantment, it says whenever you put 1 or more counters on a permanent or player, All Will Be One deals that much damage to target opponent, creature an opponent controls, or planeswalker an opponent controls. So that's a super fun card, as every time that we put a +1/+1 counter on something, we can deal that much damage to another creature, to a player, or to a planeswalker they control. So very fun, very big counter payoff. Next, we've got Primal Vigor. I did forget to mention this one earlier under the reskins. This one is Primal Vigor. It's called Bast's Blessing. This is getting a reprint in the Black Panther secret layer. Very fun artwork here. If one or more tokens would be created, twice that many of those tokens are created instead. If one or more counters would be put on a creature, twice that many +1/+1 counters are put on that creature instead. So this one is essentially a doubling season, but it affects the whole table and not just your board. So you're going to benefit from this, but other players will also benefit from this. So this one is here because of the flavor, because of the Black Panther, because of the Marvel. But doubling season is a strictly better option here. If you have a doubling season, I would recommend that instead. Or you can just kind of sideboard this. Maybe if you're playing against a tokens heavy deck or another heavy +1/+1 counters deck, maybe you don't want to run this and you sub something out. I kind of have a sideboard with a fun card here called Compost. I'll throw that up there. It's 1 and a green. It says whenever a black card is put into one of your opponent's graveyards, you may draw a card. So as long as you're playing against someone in black, it'd be really great against like a zombies player where they want to just constantly sack stuff, then you'll be able to draw a whole bunch of cards. So maybe you sub Compost out for Bast's Blessing. Next, we've got Branching Evolution. It is 2 and a green. For the counter side of a doubling season, it says if one or more +1/+1 counters would be put onto a creature you control, twice that many +1/+1 counters are put on that creature instead. So it's going to double up all those +1/+1 counters. Next, we've got Court of Garenbrig. This is 1 and 2 green for an enchantment. It says when it enters the battlefield, you become the monarch. So it's going to introduce the monarch into the game. At the beginning of your upkeep, distribute 2 +1/+1 counters among up to 2 target creatures. So you can put one here, one there, or you can take both of them and put them on one creature. Then if you're the monarch, double the number of +1/+1 counters on each creature you control. So that's bonkers. So you want to try to stay the monarch if possible. So you're doubling up those counters on your upkeep every turn. Insane. Next, we have another flavor card. This is called Forbidden Lore. I wish it said Forbidden Love. It's very close. But it's 2 and a green. It says when it enters the battlefield, choose a target land. You're going to enchant that land, and you can tap the land that Forbidden Lore is attached to and give a target creature +2/+1 until the end of turn. So this is our Jean Grey. There's a nice lady scientist looking here in the artwork of Forbidden Lore. So we went with flavor here as well, because Logan's in love with her and she's with Cyclops, so I thought that was a fun addition here as well. Next, we've got Guardian Project. This is a great source of card draw. 3 and a green. It says when a non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, if it doesn't have the same name as another creature you control or a creature card in your graveyard, draw a card. So you're going to be drawing a bunch of cards off of this as well. Next, we've got Hardened Scales for 1 green. This is also the same thing as we've talked about before with Kami. It says if one or more +1/+1 counters would be placed on a creature you control, that many +1/+1 counters are placed on it instead. So an extra counter every time you add a +1/+1 counter. Then we have Keen Sense. This is 1 green for an enchantment aura. It says enchant target creature. Whenever the enchanted creature deals damage to an opponent, you may draw a card. So more card draw on damage to your opponents. Then we've got Snake Umbra. This is 2 and a green for another aura. It says enchant creature. Enchanted creature gets +1/+1 and has, whenever this creature deals damage to an opponent, you may draw a card. So more card draw, again, on damage being dealt to. And then it also has Totem Armor, and it says if enchanted creature would be destroyed, instead remove all the damage from him and destroy this aura instead. So it will preserve whatever creature is attached to at one time. Next, we've got Thickest in the Thicket. This is a fun new reprint or a fun new card from Bloomburrow. That's 3 green, and it says when it enters a battlefield, put X/1/1 counters on target creature where X is that creature's power. At the beginning of your end step, draw 2 cards if you control the creature with the greatest power or tied for the greatest power. So hopefully going to be able to draw some cards off of that as we make Wolverine massive. Next, we've got Triumph of Ferocity. This is a super fun card, very on flavor. So this is not Wolverine, though in the artwork you might think it is. It is Garrick and Liliana. At the beginning of your upkeep, draw a card if you control the creature with the greatest power or tied for the greatest power. So again, very similar to Thickest in the Thicket. It just doesn't put any counters on anything, but more card draw. This deck needs card draw. And then lastly from our enchantments, we've got Unnatural Growth. This is another fun one. The artwork is fun here too. At the beginning of each combat, double the power and toughness of each creature you control until the end of turn. So Wolverine is going to be massive every time you go into combat. So fun thing about this, your creatures are going to get this on every combat. So on your opponent's turns, even if they're not going to target you or swing at you during their combat step, you can use your instance that say target creature fights this other creature. And during their combat at instant speed, you can have that done. And with that Unnatural Growth out, Wolverine, which is a 2/2, is going to become a 4/4. And then plus however many counters that he has on him. So it's going to be a large creature. So that's a fun one that your opponents might not see coming. So you can get rid of something that's really big and bothering you in combat, since you're going to be doubling the power and toughness of Wolverine. Next up, we've got our lands. So we've got Boseiju, who endures. This is nice because you can use it as spot removal if you need to, or it can be a land if you need it to be a land. Some nice flexibility there. Next, we also have Cinderglade. This is going to tap for green or red. The stipulation is that it will enter tapped unless you control 2 or more basic lands. Then we have Command Tower, which taps for any color in our commander's color identity, so red or green. Then we have Copperline Gorge, enters the battlefield tapped unless you have 2 or fewer lands, so a fast land is what that's called. Next we have Crag Crown Pathway. The pathways are fun because you can have them enter either color. So there's red on one side, there's green on the other side, and whatever you need it to be when you play it as your land for turn, it will just stay that. Next we have Exotic Orchard. You're going to tap for a 1 mana of any color of land that an opponent could produce. Most of the time that's going to be red or green. Then we've got some forests here. We've got 14 of those. Then we have Game Trail. It enters the battlefield. You can reveal a mountain or forest from your hand. If you don't, it enters tapped. Next we have Carplusian Forest. It taps for colorless, or it taps for a red or green, and if you need it to tap for red or green, it's going to deal 1 damage to you, so it's a little pain land there. Next we've got Mossfire Valley. You pay 1 into it, and then it taps for red and green, which is nice because you can filter out something, something like a Rogue's Passage. You can use the colorless mana from the Rogue's Passage and turn it into colored mana. Then we've got 7 mountains. We've got the Reliquary Tower here that I was just talking about, and the Rogue's Passage. Those are both colorless sources, so you can filter those. Reliquary Tower says you have no maximum hand size, and then Rogue's Passage is fun, and you'll need this potentially because you can pay 4 into it, and then target creature can't be blocked this turn. So with Wolverine dealing a bunch of damage, commander damage is going to be a very viable way to deal with your opponents in this deck, so you're going to want a way to make him unblockable. Next, we also have Rockfall Vale. It enters tapped unless you control 2 or more other lands, and it's going to tap for green or red as well. Then we've got Rootbound Crag. It enters the battlefield tapped unless you control a mountain or a forest, and you're probably going to. Then we also have Spire Garden. Enters the battlefield tapped unless you have 2 or more opponents, and in Commander, we're almost always going to, unless it's really far along in the game. Lastly, we have Thornspire Verge. This is a new one from Duskmourn, and it taps add red, and then it also taps add green, but it only activates for that green if you control a mountain or a forest, which you're probably going to. We run a lot of basics in this deck. So that rounds out this deck. This is really fun, really flavorful. I have goldfished it a whole bunch of times. Going to be taking it actually this weekend to MagicCon. Spoiler alert, these cards aren't out yet, so I'm going to be proxying them. So that should be a ton of fun. I will let you know what my findings are. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this. Please stay tuned. Smash that like button down below and hit the subscribe button as well so that you can see our next deck text. We're going to do the rest of these new X-Men Secret Layers as well, so you can see what kind of fun shenanigans we can come up with. But hey, if you're still here, drop a comment down below what card I missed. Like, what would be a super flavorful ad that I missed that needs to be in this deck for it to be maximum X-Men Marvel theme? Comment that below. Go follow us on all of our other socials. Everybody's abandoning Twitter and moving to Blue Sky, so we have one of those now. So come and find us on Blue Sky, Southern Sorcery, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye!